Hey, everybody. Welcome back to DDJ's Inferno, the weekly show where we discuss issues relevant to men in the manosphere. And today we are having a roundtable that's going to include Grizzly MGTOW, Wolf, and Apocrypha, who are guys who've been long-term in the MGTOW community and have worked with me before in making content. And obviously, you guys know Grizzly. He's got his own channel where he basically live streams on Twitch and uploads videos to YouTube. So guys, introduce yourself. Go ahead and start with Grizzly.
Hey, Cal, or just Grizzly.
Right on. Go ahead and introduce yourself again. Apparently I had you muted. I apologize.
It's okay. Hey, everybody, this is Grizzly MGTOW. Actually, these days I'm just Grizzly. Thanks for having me on DDJ.
Absolutely. And Wolf?
Hey, guys, it's Feeding the Wolf. Part-time production manager, actually full-time for DDJ, excuse me. And just call me Wolf.
Nice. And then, of course, APOC.
Hey, guys, I'm Apocrypha. You can call me APOC, and I am the designated shaman.
There it is. There it is. So one of the things that I wanted to do today is I wanted to kind of change things up on the DDJ's Inferno. As everybody knows, typically what I'll do is I'll have a single guest and we'll go ahead and we'll do a deep dive into a particular subject or, some aspect that is important to the guest and obviously important to the way I do my stream. So I think that we're going to change it up a little bit today just because I've seen a lot of transition, not just in the MGTOW community or in the manosphere, but just on YouTube in general. And I thought there were some things that were important to discuss. And I thought having a roundtable discussion would be the best way to do this and go from there. Now, before we get started, obviously everybody knows that the Southern Poverty Law Center and social justice warriors have gone, well, they've spurred out pretty bad when it comes to the enforcement of their terms of service. So I want to apologize to everybody who's listening or everybody watching the stream. If you are in the chat, you need to understand that I had to turn my auto mod up in order to make sure that I'm complying with Twitch's terms of service so that I don't get banned. Also, I've had to talk to my mods to tell them that, they need to really think about modding people who are violating terms of service. And unfortunately, this is, again, I don't want to lose my Twitch account. I don't want to be permanently banned. As you guys know, TFM was recently permanently banned on Twitch. Nobody's told him why. And so we're just kind of shooting in the dark as to what was going on. When he was banned, they didn't give him a specific reason. They didn't tell him anything he was doing. They just did it. Now, what's interesting about that is that that's actually how I got banned permanently on Twitter. And when it comes to these particular types of things, I think that it's important for us to really be mindful of how we characterize certain things, because I think that we can talk about controversial subjects and we can talk about issues important to men, but it's, the verbiage we use and how we characterize things that's going to make the huge difference. And again, eventually there will be a viable competitor for Twitch and some of these other platforms. But until then, I'd like to be able to ride these platforms as long as we can. So that we don't have to worry about certain things. So that also means, too, that, if you're in the chat and you're spamming stuff or you're saying things that might violate Twitch's terms of service, my mods will probably talk to you about it. It also means that certain questions may not get asked as well. So be aware of that. That comes from me. That's not something that Rose is doing or something that Feeding the Wolf is doing. This comes from me. So if there's any, feedback on that, definitely provide it to me. And understand that if it wasn't necessary, I wouldn't be doing it. So with that said, let's kind of jump into the subject a little bit. So I wanted to kind of talk about 3 separate issues today, and I want to kind of break them down into, we'll just call them segments, because I may cut them out, I may not, I haven't decided, but I think for my sanity, I think it's important to discuss the first 2 subjects individually and then bring the third subject in, because it kind of dovetails the other 2. And the first issue that I really want to talk about and kind of make some statements out and to start the conversation is I want to talk about the red pill. So a lot of people online, they identify themselves as being red pilled. They identify themselves as, believing that they know the truth, or believing that they adhere to the truth, or adhere to verifiable facts and observable reality, for lack of a better term. As you guys know, the red pill originally comes from the Matrix movie franchise. And it's basically the uncomfortable truth versus the blue pill, which is the comfortable lie. And the thing that is important, I think, the takeaway from this is that most people are not interested or willing to address the uncomfortable truths. And we see this in a variety of different communities in the real world anyway. So there's real world applications to this particular paradigm. Now, my position is this, based on everything that I've seen recently, and on, things I'm seeing in YouTube, things I'm seeing in the MGTOW community, things I'm seeing in the manosphere, and just pretty much all over. And the concept I want to discuss today is the red pill is not enough. And so what I mean by that, and I kind of touched on it a little bit last night with TFM's stream on Gab, but I think that it's important that people talk about this, because the red pill has become so common that now it's a meme. I mean, we have a feminist who made a movie about herself called The Red Pill, when she's talking about her quote unquote experience, in the MRA movement. And, the red pill has gotten to be so commonplace that everybody, it's a meme, and, it's like, oh, I'm red pill. See, I have the t-shirt. So, guys, why don't we open it up? And what are your thoughts on this idea that the red pill may not be enough? And what are you seeing? Grizzly?
Talking about the red pill, I don't know if it's about not being enough for me right now. It's about going deeper into it and realizing things. And I don't know if that's because I'm getting older or because I'm getting wiser, or both. Because I'm looking at this red pill. Initially, you wake up, let's keep it in the context of the manosphere stuff. You realize that the system is rigged against you. You realize that the whole system is hosed, especially if you're married or if you get divorce raped. And we realize, feminism, female nature, gynocentrism. We get all that stuff. But then at a certain point, you got to do a little bit of a deeper dive on it and start looking at, personal development, growing up, the way you carry yourself, the way you talk to people, how you represent yourself. There's a certain awakening to that too, because all these guys are coming around saying red pill, red pill, red pill. It's then when you talk to them, it's like, are you really red pill, or are you just using that to further your own ends?
Exactly. APOC, what are your thoughts?
Well, yeah, I agree with Grizzly. Basically, it goes back to something that sort of a thing that Paul Purdy has characterized, which is it's not enough to move away from something. You have to know what you're moving to. And, from a personal standpoint, when I hear the phrase, the red pill is not enough, I think, yeah, it's true. Once you wake up, once you understand the world around you, then you have to decide what you're going to do. There's a short period where you are readjusting, you're reassessing, you're deciding, oh, okay, so I have to change my tool set. I have to understand what's really going on. I have to change the way I interact with the world. But once you do that, once you actually go through that process, then what do? And there's very little, there's very little guidance as to the next step. And the people who are offering that guidance are actually regressive. They're regressive people. They're just like former PUAs and stuff like that. So they're actually trying to pull people back towards the blue pill. So it's kind of strange how it's going right now in the manosphere.
I
tend to think so as well. Wolf, what are your thoughts?
Okay. I actually agree a lot with these guys. I'm going to put it in a different way, though. I think that having the knowledge, like just having red pill knowledge, is great. That's awesome. But unless you've internalized it into yourself and made it a part of who you are, it doesn't mean anything. It's kind of like, guys, I'm a gun guy. That's my thing. And guys will say, well, I got my concealed carry and I'm carrying now, Sometimes they'll only carry every once in a while. I carry every day. And they'll also say, well, I'm carrying, but I don't have one in the chamber. Well, if you don't have one in the chamber, you ain't ready. You just need to, you're still kind of blue pill, in my opinion. And that's how people are acting in the manosphere too, because, well, they'll say, I watched TFM's videos or I watched DDJ's videos. but they haven't made the knowledge part of their life. It's not a part of their lifestyle. They just regurgitate what they heard on a video.
Well, and I think that you hit the nail on the head as well. And yeah, I agree with everything that's been said here also, not to kiss up too much, but I think that you hit the nail on the head. And it's not the knowledge that you know, it's the knowledge that you incorporate into your life. I mean, if you go to any person who is morbidly obese, they know what they need to do to get in shape. They know what they need to do to get healthy. The question is whether or not they're actually willing to do it. Or, if they're in a situation where there are obstacles in their way to becoming healthy, what are they going to do to overcome those particular obstacles? Obviously, somebody who's 150 pounds overweight is not going to be running any triathlons anytime soon. But, they could be doing something to slowly work up to the point where they're a lot more healthy than they were. And I think that the issue when I look at the red pill and to go back to the Matrix analogy, what's interesting about the red pill is that, when Morpheus gave Neo the red pill, Neo was already seeking. He was already looking for something else. He was blue pilled, but he knew that there was a truth out there that he didn't understand or that he didn't appreciate. And so he was looking for more. So I think that when it comes to people, and I hear this question all the time, I hear it on the TFM show, and I've heard it dozens of times on my own stream. And that is, hey, DDJ, I'm trying to red pill my friend or my brother or my dog or my neighbor or whatever, and it's really difficult. Well, the issue is that you can't red pill anyone who is not seeking or searching for themselves. And that's really the takeaway in the very beginning. If you look at the Matrix, there's all these people who are plugged into the Matrix and they're happy there. They're thrilled there. And, I'm sure that, before Morpheus met Neo, he said, look, do you want the blue pill or do you want the red pill? There was probably a fair amount of people who were like, they thought about it. They're like, you know what? I think I'm going to stick with the red pill because I'm really comfortable here. I'm happy with what I've got. I'm happy with my station in life and those types of things.
The blue pill.
Or the blue pill. I'm sorry. Thank you. But I think that the other side of it is that once you take the red pill, that's a starting point. Neo took the red pill and, he threw up and he had to be rescued and he almost died. And all these horrible things happened after he took the red pill. And then all of a sudden he realized, well, shit, now I'm eating mush instead of steak. Now I'm, so there's that process, kind of like the red pill rage that a lot of people in the MGTOW community talk about, where it's like you
go backwards for a minute. You get
exactly
sick, you try a new lifestyle regime or something. I'm in the middle of that right now myself, but yeah, you feel like you're going backwards. You get sick, you get all discombobulated. You're what's familiar. What was familiar to you is no longer there. So you have an awkward readjustment period.
Exactly. And to dovetail what APOC said, where he was talking about how there's like some collectivism going on and about how it's kind of like an odd sort of thing where these people are regressive who are talking about the red pill and they're having this conversation. What's interesting is you look at Zion in the movie franchise, The Matrix. Zion is like the city where everybody goes. They all live there. Everybody in the fucking city is red pill. Everybody. That's like their baseline. Everybody is red pill in the city. But that's not enough. They still need people to protect them. They still need people with skill sets. They still need people who are willing, capable, and competent to handle the threats that face them. And not all red pill people, not all red pill men and women are competent and capable of doing that. And what's interesting about that is even when you take that analogy and you apply it, for example, in the YouTube sphere, there are content creators out there who are red pill, and it's not enough for them. They are still collectivists. They still cling to these old societal concepts that may not work to take them to the next level. And you see this all the time. And some of these people are pretty they're pretty popular. They've got large sub counts. They've got a large following of people, and they're just as regressive as some of the social justice warriors and some of those people that we disagree with. So yeah, and again, I think that APOC again hit it on the head where it says, well, when they're regressive, you shouldn't be following them. You shouldn't be paying attention to them in that they are going to lead you down the wrong path. And so one of the things that I always say is this: trust but verify. If someone says something to you try your best within reason to verify that there is something that supports what it is they say. Because there are people out there who they have a cult of personality, they're highly charismatic, and they have this idea in their head where, you know, they mean well, but you know, they create these echo chambers around them, maybe accidentally, maybe on purpose, who knows? But they end up being in these echo chambers where they can't accept that maybe they might have made a mistake, or, you know, maybe they're looking through something through a confirmation bias lens or some other aspect like that. And, you know, then they end up going on the wrong path. And it's just like it's like a sailing trip. You know, you set your compass 4 degrees in the wrong direction, and, you know, 4 degrees later, you're in a completely different continent where you thought you were going to be. So, you know, I think that those things are very important. I know I kind of ranted a little bit. Anybody want to jump in here and offer some feedback?
Yeah. When you talk about the content creators that are offering strange things, I think that you're talking about men who have hopefully actually realized what's going on. But then what they do during their readjustment period is they just find a new way, and instead of embrace, because it's difficult, right? I mean, it's hard to embrace this, because we don't like it's just, it's like you want to spit it out, you know, you want to spit it out, but you can't, or at least I can't. So what they end up doing is,
so what you're saying, did you swallow? Is that what I'm hearing?
Damn.
every
Only
time.
on Saturdays.
Not even, you know, anything worth doing is worth doing, you know, completely.
And twice.
But no, I guess I'm just saying that they create their own alternative reality inside their content, and they start receiving validation from their subs and from their from their commenters and so on, and some of them seem to have completely forgotten why they started it in the first place. They go back into a blue pill mentality, and they don't even realize.
Yeah, I can see that. Wolf or Grizzly, you want to weigh in here?
I just look at it is the whole red pill's not enough, because we're a very external society, meaning we have social media now, we have Twitter, which we didn't have back in my day. And the thing is, I'm trying to run away from that a little bit, because I think as far as the red pill not being enough for development, it's time to go inside, get in some of that introspection and start asking yourself questions. And that's what I've been doing.
Well,
and it's more related to personal development, the way we carry ourselves, the way we talk to people. Because even a guy like me, there's people that look up to me on my videos. They kind of like, you know, I have 14-year-old kids making comments about what's going on and stuff. And it's like, wait a minute, am I leading these kids down the wrong path by using curse words every other word? Am I on point? Am I carrying myself like a proper adult man, a masculine man?
Right.
And how can I better that as I get older?
Right. Wolf, what are your thoughts?
Okay. Well, my opinion is that if you're red pill, you shouldn't be looking for a leader. You need to be finding your own path. I mean, I hang around you guys. I don't agree with everything, you know, you say, and you don't agree with everything I say, but we're cool and all that.
Banhammer incoming.
Right. If you follow somebody, you need to be looking to be a leader of yourself, not a follower. Although you need to know, to be a leader, you need to know how to follow. That's always been the rule. But to be red pill, to be truly free, you need to be on your own path. And that doesn't mean, you know, disagreeing with this false bravado, like we were talking about earlier before the show, that you need to have this fake. Yeah, exactly. That's where I was going. This fake tough guy act where you want to disagree just to be disagreeable. I think that's foolish. You need to have a better sense of yourself. That's what the red pill is about. It's about self-improvement and being the best you can be instead of this false bravado.
Right.
Yeah.
Well,
it's not about shouting. I mean, it's only about screaming in the desert for a little while. At some point, you got to do something.
Right. Well, and I think that this is a good spot to transition to the next subject that I wanted to address, and that is the way the manosphere has interpreted and foments the idea of the alpha beta paradigm when it comes to alpha, beta, gamma, and the whole manosphere ranking system, I think we'll call it. But I like to call it the alpha beta paradigm. I think the manosphere does it wrong. And I know Wolf and APOC and I talked a little bit the other day about this, and I think that it's important and bears repeating. And what I mean by this is that when you look at the alpha beta paradigm and you look at this idea of what is alpha, what is beta, and everybody, and usually you see this within PUAs, and you see this originally it was the PUA community that kind of pushed this. And I think the idea of alpha needs to really, when we look at this, we need to look at it from, again, a perspective of observable reality and verifiable facts. And the way the manosphere applies this terminology, I think, is incorrect. And I think we need to look at it from, again, a more fact-based perspective. And so humans, we're social animals, right? And initially, when, MGTOW 1.0 was out, basically, the MGTOW were talking about, getting out of society, being a ghost and going and living in the woods and, burning your own shit for warmth and things like that. And I think that being self-reliant is important. But because humans are social animals, there have been massive studies that say, look, if you completely isolate yourself from the world and everything around you, that's not psychologically healthy, and you'll die early. I mean, there are studies where babies who don't get touched by anybody after they're born, they will die. They will die very quickly and won't even make it to a year old. So, these things are verified by facts. But I also think that when it comes to this idea of alpha beta paradigm, I think this, alpha is more of a status, an external status, rather than something that is internal within you. And I think when you guys talk about this, where you're talking about the red pill is not enough and you're searching for your own path and, you have to go out and you have to find your own way, I think that's important. But I also think that at some level, we are a community, hopefully, of individuals. And so when it comes to the alpha beta paradigm, everybody's like, well, the alpha fucks and the beta bucks. Well, alpha, in my view, was never meant to be a permanent position. Alpha is external status. It is not this idea of I'm alpha and I'm always alpha. Because if that was the case, then Brad Pitt would have never been divorce raped. Johnny Depp would have never been divorce raped. Yet both of them were, and both of them were cheated on. I think Brad Pitt may not have been cheated on, but I know Johnny Depp was. And you also look at it from this idea of beta. If you take social animals like wolves, I think certain apes and things like that, the betas were the enforcers. They weren't just like the cucks. They weren't what what we consider cucks or gammas. In biology, they speak of them as omegas. So those are just kind of some things I want to throw out there. I don't want to get too ranty because I want to have a good conversation with everybody. So what are your thoughts? Let's start with APOC this time.
Well, yeah. The thing about the whole alpha beta thing is that it varies over time. So, and we were talking about this the other day as well. There's a big mischaracterization when you say, oh, you've got to be alpha or fuck betas, alpha fucks beta bucks and omegas and all these things. In reality, where you sit in a hierarchy tends to vary not only over time but across groups. So there are some hierarchies I belong to where I'm near the top or at the top, and there are some I belong to that I'm nowhere near the top, and that's fine because I'm not competent enough to hold the top brains. So not only is the whole alpha beta paradigm completely bereft of covariance over time, it's also completely bereft of the understanding that we're always members of many different dominance hierarchies. There's not one dominance hierarchy. There's tons of them. So it actually, and I think this is part of the reason why some of these guys just carry themselves like assholes, because they think they need to be on the top of all hierarchies. So but you can't be. It's not just about physical dominance. It's about competence. So you can't be competent at everything. And so if you're walking into, a situation where you're not as competent as the next guy, acting like a dick isn't going to make you as competent as him. In fact, it's just going to get you ostracized and
get your ass kicked. Yeah,
exactly. So it's understanding that being graceful, like Lone Wolf is saying, you have to You have to know how to follow in order to lead, and that's part of what I'm talking about. You can't lead in everything. We don't live in a single note society. This isn't 10,000 BC.
Right.
We have a very complex multi-layer society. There are many, many, many hierarchies, and we're members of all the hierarchies we belong to in different strata. You can't be alpha all the time. You can't, and you have to be able to be graceful about it.
You know, it's kind of funny you mentioned that, because I remember when I was a student in martial arts, I would go to my martial arts school, and the head instructor would be there early, and he's cleaning the mats, he's cleaning the toilets, he's doing all of the things he could probably delegate to other people. And I remember asking him about it one time, and he said, "Look," he said, "not only am I here to teach you and to lead," he goes, "but I want to show you that I'm here for you. I'm your servant." And I think that when it comes to ethical leadership, I think at some level that has to be the case. And because the only way that you can effectively lead is by knowing how to follow and by learning the structures and the pieces there. That's why when you see, like in the military, the sergeant is highly respected over, sometimes over the lieutenant, especially in like Vietnam, because the sergeant was the private. He was the guy who did all the garbage work, and he did have to work his way up. So he can not only empathize with the people under him, he has their respect, because again, it's that level of competence, and it's the persistence and the consistency in which he's able to do his job, and the mastery of those skills and abilities he needs to have it. And I think that those things, the mastery, the knowledge, and the follow through and the consistency are absolutely important when it comes to being an effective leader. So Grizzly, what's your feedback? What's your take on this?
And knowing your limitations.
Exactly.
I don't know. You know what? I look at this whole alpha, beta paradigm, gamma, zeta, whatever. And if we were in a situation like, I said, the crap hits the fan, things are collapsing, it's kind of like a dog eat world. I could see the whole alpha, beta thing, but society right now, we're stable. And I think there's a lot of BS to it, because, a guy may be quote unquote a beta in one area, but he's absolutely alpha top dog in another area. And then you got a situation where the so-called alpha needs the beta or gamma to get something done for him, because if that thing doesn't get done, nothing's going forward. Right. And they need that guy. And I just really hate the whole paradigm. These guys chest beating, I'm the alpha. Because if you got to beat your chest to say you're the alpha, you're not the alpha. Right. I'm sorry. And, I'm better at some things than you are. You're better. It's all a bunch of crap. And I like how you talked about your martial arts instructor, because that right there is called leading by example. Right. Because if I'm the so-called sensei or the one that's running this thing, and I'm humble enough, and I think there's humility is a big thing in leadership, and I'm here washing the mats, then hey, you know what? There's nothing wrong with you getting down and washing the mats. I'm leading by example. Lead at the front. You don't lead at the rear. If you're going to be that type of person, you listen to your subordinates that you could trust, and and they know what's going on. That's But the whole alpha thing, I always picture some Chad beating his chest. I'm the top dog. I'm the quarterback, and it's just such a one-dimensional ideology. And it works in the animal kingdom, because in the animal kingdom, animals don't have a frontal cortex like we do. So It works perfectly where the strongest one leads, because it's a very two-dimensional thing. I could whip the butt of so-and-so in the pack, everybody's butt. So therefore I'm the leader. But after a while, you start getting older and someone's going to take over. And it's just, like I said, to me, I don't like the whole alpha beta thing at all. I think, like I said, people are good in other areas.
Well, and I think that this kind of dovetails a little bit on the red pill not being enough, in that the whole alpha beta paradigm, in order for it to work. And I mean, it does happen. We see it in social animals. We see it in wolves. We see it somewhat in humans. We also see it in, I think, chimpanzees, for example. I mean, we see it in social animals. But what's interesting about it is you hit the nail on the head, and that is, alpha is a status, it is a title, and it is temporary. And once somebody else comes along, you lose your alpha status. Sometimes you get killed for it. Sometimes you get ostracized for it. And sometimes you just kind of mold back into the pack or whatever. And again, if you get old or something happens to you, you lose your status. You could be the biggest, greatest, most beautiful, biggest dick Chad in the world. But if you get into a catastrophic car accident that leaves you a paraplegic, you're not an alpha. You're done.
But here's the thing too. You mentioned like the team situation, and like where the sergeant is a leader. And I'm a veteran, so but at the same time, when you're doing something as a group, as a team, it's like, okay, you know what, you did this. Now this is so and so's area. Let's shine the spotlight on him because this is where he's specialized at, and he's better than everybody else in the group. Not that the people in the group are good at it, but he's the best of the best when it comes to that particular thing. So that's, but you have one guy who keeps them all organized. He's the example. He leads, like I said, he leads from the front. He's the example. He's the guy that wouldn't ask anybody else to do something that he wouldn't do.
Right.
But he's willing to let that whole thing go in a situation where his skills aren't sufficient and put someone up there that can do the best job. Exactly.
Wolf, what are your thoughts?
Okay. Yeah, I got quite a bit to say about this one. I guess I'll start with the military aspect. The lieutenant, the platoon leader, he's going to listen a lot to the sergeant first class, the platoon sergeant, because the lieutenant's basically he's basically a private with a butter bar. So he needs to be humble, even though he outranks the sergeant. He needs to be humble. He needs to listen because that sergeant has a lot of experience and the respect of the men in most cases. And he knows each individual man and what they're capable of. So that's usually how platoon dynamics work, and it works out pretty well. But the other thing I wanted to say is I agree with you that alpha is a status, but I think it's also partially a mindset. I kind of agree with Rollo Tomasi on that it's a mindset. And he actually writes a whole chapter in one of his books, The Rational Male, about, and he agrees with you guys because he talks about the contextual alpha. So like a teacher in a classroom, he's kind of the alpha of the room, at least during the class. You know what I'm saying? But outside, he could be the biggest beta bitch in the world.
Absolutely.
Right. In the classroom, he is the man. And
right.
I think that's about all I wanted to cover, that it can be very contextual. And I think that's it. I think I'm good.
Yeah. And that was the thing, too. And the other thing I wanted to say, too, is I think that it's important to also talk about this idea of omega, and the idea of omega in social animal biology is the one who gets fucked with. They're what the manosphere calls the gamma. They get made fun of. They're sort of like the outcasts. Everybody can kick their ass and there's no problem. But I think that people to understand too is that that is an external status situation as well. And I also think that you hit on something that's also important. And again, it's that mindset. I think that there is a leadership mindset that's necessary because, being alpha isn't just physical characteristics. It's also maturity. It's also this idea of, having mastery of knowledge and skill set. But the thing that I think that's most important, and the thing that I wanted to have the takeaway is that, not everybody is alpha, because not everybody has that particular status. And even if they have that particular status, that status is temporary. The reality is that most people are betas. And I don't mean that in a negative connotation as much as I mean that the betas are the enforcers. The betas are the ones who are the protectors of the pack. They are the ones who do that. They're the soldiers, the doctors, the police officers, the security personnel. They are the ones who are doing the heavy lifting that this really talks about, how betas and alphas truly function in society, as opposed to how the manosphere tries to address it, if that makes sense.
It absolutely.
DDJ?
Go ahead, Grizzly.
I'm sorry. I didn't. Go ahead, Apocrypha. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
I was just going to say this. What it seems like they're doing is they're emphasizing only the competitive aspects of the dichotomy. They're not talking about the cooperative aspects. And that's exactly what you just said, which is that people have to cooperate to get things done. And alphas and betas and betas and betas and whatever the hell, people are cooperating and competing at the same time. Otherwise, nothing would ever get done.
Exactly. So, yeah. So, I mean, I think that piece is important. And I think that this idea of shaming betas is, it's not accurate. Now, the reason I bring this up, and this is kind of a full circle sort of thing, is because you always hear about this paradigm of the alpha bucks, beta bucks. And, one of the things that you talked about APOC as well as you, Wolf, was this idea of being alpha is external status, but most importantly, it's contextual. So, in one arena, this person might be the leader. They might be the most skilled person that's there, and they are the alpha within that context or within that group. But then you take them out of that group, or you take them out of that comfort zone and you put them somewhere else, and they might be an omega. They might be so far out of the thing that people are just making fun of them. Now, the reason that I bring
that's why I wanted to jump in about
go ahead,
the whole omega thing. A good leader, alpha, whatever you want to call it, a good leader will take that omega and do everything possible to bring that omega up to speed, because that omega might be an omega not because he or she or whatever was just born an omega, pathetic, loser, the one that gets made fun of by everybody. That may be a consequence of socialization, indoctrination, whatever. But
taking that person out of their comfort zone. Yeah,
taking that person out of their comfort zone, bringing them up to speed, teaching them the way, because they might not know. And especially when you're in a group, your weakest link will take you down. So you want to do your best to bring that guy up. Sometimes it always doesn't work, but depending on how you do it, you could bring that guy, quote unquote, out of omega status and get him up to speed, because he might not know something. He might be kind of unfamiliar with stuff. For example, I'll just use this example. He might be a mama's boy and he doesn't know anything else.
Yeah, because he didn't have a strong father.
He didn't learn from leaders, yeah. And and sometimes a guy may be badass as F, and then in one area, but then in another area he might be the omega. So it varies. But the point being is, a good leader will take that person and will do their level best to bring them up to speed, to talk to the other people, to help that guy instead of making fun of him, help him get to a level. And sometimes you get surprised.
Well, and I also think that the reason I wanted to bring this full circle is because of the alpha bucks, or the alpha fucks beta bucks paradigm. And what I mean by that is that, everybody talks about this idea of the alpha fucks beta bucks. Well, the reality is that the guy who's normally the alpha fucks for the purposes of that particular context, he's only the alpha fuck for the honeymoon period. And the reason that he's the alpha fuck for the honeymoon period is because the woman who's interested in him thinks that he's something that he's not typically, especially if he's a PUA, because usually PUAs are just, they're ghetto rich. They flash a bunch of, success that they really don't have.
They embellish.
Exactly. They completely embellish. Whereas, their significant other, the husband who's working hard for them, that person, he is the alpha of his home, but he's probably the beta in a variety of other contexts. And I think that this is why it's important, because a lot of times these guys will come out and they'll get completely divorce raped, or they'll have their significant other cheat on them, and they leave as broken men. And what ends up happening is that in these scenarios, they turn to the manosphere and they start looking for that wisdom that they didn't have. They're like, well, shit, how do I rebuild my life? Well, there's that shaming period that comes through when they talk about that alpha bucks, beta fucks, or beta bucks sort of thing. I'm sorry, I'm getting tongue tied. But my point is that when they're in the valley of suicide, and I'm talking about, when TFM talks about, his video series on it, when they're in the valley of suicide, all that paradigm, all that manosphere applied paradigm does is depress them. It enhances the red pill rage. It enhances their feelings of inadequacy. It enhances everything else it's going through, because, they were told a certain thing, and now they found out that certain thing doesn't apply anymore. And now they don't have their family. They don't have their children, and, their significant other has moved on. And what they don't understand is that the majority of the time when their ex is cheating on them, she's not going to stay with that guy. He's going to dump her, and he's going to, move on to something else, or she's going to end up finding out that he wasn't all he was cracked up to be, or what she thought he was cracked up to be, and he's going to leave from there. And again, it's anybody can be alpha in the honeymoon period. You know, when you're in the probationary period, you know, you can put your best foot forward and you might seem like, you know, this is like, you know, Billy Badass. That's what the interview is for. But I think that at the end of the time, once you get past the probationary period, people know where you stand. They know what, you know, that's why it takes people time to move up in organizations, because they might appear to be alpha. They might appear to be, you know, on first impression, appear to be like this super thing. But then once you get a chance to get to know them and you see that they're really human with flaws and everything else, and you take them off the pedestal, now all of a sudden you're looking at them for what they really are. And I think that the manosphere in general does a very poor job of explaining that to the men who come and seek wisdom, because these men are hurt. These men are, again, they've been divorce raped. They've been cheated upon. They've just been verbally and emotionally abused and oftentimes gaslighted. And so I think that it's important, when we talk about this paradigm, that we talk about it for what it really is, which is external status, rather than talking about red pill wisdom in that, look, even though these bad things happen to you, let's talk about what you need to do to learn how to stand up again, to learn how to run again, to learn how to do whatever it is that you used to do, and to do the things that made you successful in your life, you know, in the first place. And I think that's the piece that most people miss. And so that's why I think that, especially in this world now, where all masculinity is considered to be a negative thing, and you know, you're not masculine unless, you know, you're trying to help your child, you know, be sexually assaulted by identifying as transgender when they're 4, right? Just shit like that. And I think that it's absolutely frustrating, because men don't have a place to go to get the support that they need. Because I'll tell you what, the PUAs aren't going to do it. The PUAs are just trying to make money off of them. And
they're going to say you should have chosen the better person.
Exactly. And
crap like that. They're going to kick them in the gut instead of helping them up.
Well, and here's the thing. I think that at some level, I think that they're right. Right? I mean, if you're dating somebody and she's like, oh yeah, you know, everything's great. I go to church on Sundays and everything else. But, you know, I work 4 days a week. Monday through Thursday, I work as a stripper. Well,
obvious. That's pretty obvious, though.
Right. But you know what I'm saying? I mean, there are, and that's an obvious one. But I also think, I mean, so when it comes to the relationship piece, I think that the tradcons, they get it somewhat close in that not all the wisdom that they provide is negative. But I think that where they miss the point, and where the entire narrative falls apart, is that the second that you start bringing up how feminists have changed the laws to divorce rape men and to discriminate against men and to demonize men, that's where they lose the narrative completely. They have nothing to say. They're like, oh yeah, that happens. Oh yeah, well, what do you want to do about it? Well, I don't know. Well, no. And they don't think about it. That's the thing. Because even if you brainstorm a potential solution, you at least are attempting to come up with solutions. Because like I said in my video yesterday, any fucking moron with eyes can see the problem. But we need to have more people who are talking about what potential solutions are, rather than just saying it's my way or the highway, or, you know, you just got to go out there and find a better woman. By the way, vote for me. You know, shit like that. Those turn out to be platitudes and slogans rather than solutions. So, I mean, that's kind of my little rant. Yeah. What do you guys think?
Yeah, it really bothers me. This constant, most of the content creators in the manosphere now, they're talking about how you can succeed as a man. It's like, what? Like, no. How about self-improvement? How about actual self-improvement? How about stopping this positive thought speak nonsense that's just reinforcing? That's what I was saying about them being regressive. Right. Everything you're saying. They're basically pulling men back into the group mentality. I don't know if they're doing it on purpose or not. I can't say. But it has the effect of just creating another collective around them instead of around whatever the hell these guys were around before. And it's not helping them. It's just not.
How about stepping on the path of self-actualization?
Exactly.
Instead of trying to conform to some image or whatever that they want you to conform to. And getting back to what you were saying, DDJ, these guys that have been stomped down, divorce raped, and just absolutely conquered, at least for outspoken gents such as myself and you, instead of saying, you know, we don't do this, but instead of telling a guy, hey, you should have chose better, we need to help that guy out, and we need to help him, guide him through that valley of suicide, so he doesn't end up getting stuck and blowing his brains out or doing something stupid,
right?
Or something that's a long-term solution to a short-term problem.
Yeah, and I think that that's absolutely important. But I also think that the other piece of it is this: he has to be looking for the red pill.
Right.
He has to be solution oriented.
I've been through that. Yeah, I tried to red pill a friend. It doesn't work, and he's yet another whirlwind romance. 4 months in, and he's all bubbly eyed for this chick.
Right.
This actually reminds me of the old tradition of how Buddhist monasteries used to accept or reject candidates, and that had the old idea of sitting in front of the gates for days.
Yep. Sacrifice.
You had to show you wanted it. You had to show that you were you were really there. You weren't going to leave. You wanted to know. You wanted to understand. You had to prove yourself, and that was one way that they accomplished that, was by you had to sit there for days before they would accept you.
Well, yeah, and that's the other thing too. When we talk about this alpha beta status and this red pill status, when things are going good, everybody's on board. Everybody's like, yeah, that sounds great. But you really don't understand how dedicated somebody is until the clouds start forming and the rain starts coming down and the lightning and the thunder happen and the storms of life come in and just start fucking over everything with tornadoes. Because the people who stand with you when that tornado is done and they stood with you through that tornado, those are going to be the people that are going to help you. And I notice that a lot of times when it comes to these types of scenarios, almost everybody will abandon the people who need the help. And again, I think that it's a double-edged sword though as well, because again, you want to be able to help people, but if they're not willing to help themselves, if they're not taking that sense of ownership and they're not completely invested, there is nothing you can do that can change their lives or that can give them any kind of positive impact to help their situation. But with that said, Lone Wolf, you've been pretty quiet. What are your thoughts on this?
Sorry, I've just been dealing with stuff behind the scenes and questions. I don't really have any input on this, but I will say this, guys. We're probably going to go to the questions before too long. But if you have a question, please put question in parentheses and to who you're talking to, either the panel or a specific individual, and make it readable. Use proper grammar, please, or it might get ignored. So
now, I do have something to add on to that as well. So it appears as though the Bukkake choke slams are working. So if you guys have been watching the stream and you're on PC, and I believe it's Twitch TV, you'll see on the right-hand side of the screen, you'll see these green Bukkake choke slams coming up. So basically, you can redeem those if you click the little box that highlights when you mouse over it on the right-hand side. It's like a little green box with a question mark. If you click that, you could redeem those Bukkake choke slams 1 point per question, and you can ask questions. Those questions will also get logged, and I'll be able to hit those questions as well. I believe they're working again, so we can test it today. Just remember, there's a character limit in questions, so if you have a very long question, it's not probably going to get asked, or it's going to get cut off, and we're just going to laugh at you. Also, if you're asking questions in the chat by using the brackets, questions in caps, and then who the question is to, make sure it's a single part question rather than a multi-part question at all possible. Again, there is a character limit, and I also want to make sure that everybody has a chance to ask questions who they want to. And then finally, before we jump back to the conversation, this is my hashtag shill alert. On the bottom of the Twitch chat, you're going to see some links. You can support me on Patreon. In addition to that, you can go to the MGTOW group on Minds and check it out. I formed the group, but there's, 100, 150 people there. Feel free to join it, check it out, contribute, post links, that kind of thing. You've also got my Bitchute channel in case YouTube takes me down. You can find me there on Bitchute. In addition to that, you can, of course, pick up my book, The Feminist Lie. It was never about equality. And then finally, I would say this. If you subscribe to Amazon Prime, you could subscribe to this channel. It costs you nothing, and it does benefit me. So it's another way that you can support the channel as well. So my hashtag shill alert is done. And I think that this is probably a good time to transition to the third subject that I wanted to discuss. And that is spurging is not just for social justice warriors anymore. And what I mean by that is that a few years ago, we used to see thank you for the subscription, Grizzly.
You're welcome.
a few years ago, we used to see social justice warriors just losing their shit when it came to people who disagreed with them. We would see them, protesting in the streets, whether it be Antifa or BAM or anybody else, shouting people down like if they were in an auditorium giving a speech. Anybody a social justice warrior would disagree with, they would shout them down. They would pull fire alarms. They would do all this sort of, protest type activity to deplatform, to silence, to interfere, to interrupt, basically to censor any speech they disagreed with. And I think that it really left a bad taste in a lot of people's mouths. And we saw it, there were a lot of YouTubers at that time who stood out against it. There was the Gamergate YouTubers who grew. There were a lot of people who spoke out against us and they rightly did. I think it was important for them to have that conversation, because if we don't have free speech, we don't have any other rights as well. Now, with that in mind, I've started seeing something. I mean, I've been on YouTube now since April of last year. So just over a year and 3 months. And what I've seen is that there are now multiple communities that are adopting social justice warrior tactics to silence their detractors. I mean, we're seeing people in the alt-right. We're seeing people in other communities. There are even people who are PUAs, who are content creators, and they are going and, they're practicing entryism. Again, it's that idea of, sneaking into another community and pretending you're them so that you can create your cult of personality. There's a lot of high commitment trolls that will create a sock puppet account and then, make YouTube content in a particular community so that they can ingratiate themselves to that community for the express purpose of basically tearing the community apart from within. And I'm not just talking about, the skeptic community or anything else. I'm talking about a lot of different types of communities. We see a variety of communities within YouTube and in online forums and things like that. All these communities are subject to this. I mean, we had the big Reddit purges, and that's the other piece that happens as well, is that these leftist spurgs originally, they would go into Reddit and they would brigade a post. So they would downvote brigade a post, hoping that the post would go away. They would have sock puppets and, bots and things like that. And then you saw it in 2016. You saw the Hillary Clinton campaign. They hired a bunch of online trolls through Correct the Record. Correct the Record was writing a bunch of false articles. They were writing propaganda, and then they were going around and false flagging anybody that they didn't like. Well, we fast forward to 2018, and we see people in the alt-right have been accused of doing this, and there's been evidence that some elements within the alt-right and within the white nationalist movement have done it. There have been people within the MGTOW community who, they're not MGTOW, they're PUAs, and they've been flagging established MGTOW channels, and they've been going after people because they can't handle the argument, they can't handle the discussion, and they are unwilling to have a reasonable discussion without reeing all over themselves. And so I think almost every major established MGTOW channel on the internet has been false flagged by these idiots because they can't handle it. They can't handle civil disagreement. They can't handle this idea of somebody disagreeing with them within their own community. And I think that it's a serious issue because these people are claiming to be alpha. They're claiming to be red pilled. They're claiming to be, you have to follow me, that kind of thing. And this isn't just within the MGTOW community. This is everywhere. We see this. We see channels being flagged all the time. And I think that the problem that I have with it is that when these groups, whether the individuals doing this are identifying themselves as men going their own way, or whether they're identifying themselves as alt-right, or whether they identify themselves as white nationalists or conservative or liberal or centrist or whatever, skeptic, doesn't matter what they identify themselves as who they are. What matters is that the more they false flag, the more they downvote, the more they attack these other people that they disagree with who are not social justice warriors. They are doing social justice warriors' job for them. And I think that is a huge issue. And I think it's something that has to be addressed in a serious way. Because if they aren't, all of a sudden, there's not going to be any voices of opposition. And everybody knows that social justice is cancer because there are no verifiable facts to support it. There are no, studies that say that this is good. And every time socialism tries, it destroys everything around it. So when it comes to these types of things, I think that these things are extremely important to address. Guys, what are your thoughts?
Go ahead, APOC.
Wow. Well, that's a mouthful.
That's what she said.
Wow. Screaming and shouting. Again, it goes back to what we're saying. We were talking earlier about people carrying themselves with dignity and grace, right?
Right.
And with being a leader by example, leading with service, and so on. Those are the characteristics you want to foster. If you're walking into a room and you're going, you're doing it wrong. You're just doing it wrong. It's basically when someone who is a powerful person protests, it won't sound like that. It'll sound like the thunder clapping from the sky.
Right.
That's what I'm saying. Like, again, I talked about this with Lone Wolf earlier. Someone who has dignity and integrity is going to act with dignity and integrity all the time. And that includes even when they're upset or even when they've had to cross a line, because you won't cross lines unless you have no other alternative. And when you do, you'll do so without looking back, without restraint, without any concern, because you're doing the right thing. So the whole business of people spurging out and going crazy over all these, it's just like, you're right. It's like a chihuahua barking. It doesn't really do anything. It's just naked aggression.
Well, and I think that in addition to that, the reason that I get frustrated by it is because there are content creators out there who are teaching people to think for themselves. They are teaching people to question the narrative, especially when it has no factual support. And they are teaching people to not be sheep. And it is these content creators, whether they're in the MGTOW community or whether they're in other communities, these content creators are the ones being targeted. They are the ones who the fake alphas and the hyenas in the corner are yipping at and trying to go after. It's like it's like the gang of losers is upset that other people are actually teaching people to stand on their own 2 feet and to be self-sufficient and to support good decision making and mature decision making, and they just can't handle it. And then they get upset when content creators respond and hold them to account. And now all of a sudden, it becomes an issue. And I think that it's a level of drama that just doesn't need to happen. So, Grizzly, what are your thoughts?
You know what? I'll start out with potato futures are in the basement because it's been a great potato harvest this year.
Don't short potatoes.
Yeah, exactly. They're not even Irish potatoes. It's bad, and that's part of the reason why I've been moving away from the MGTOW label, because you're getting these men, and instead of acting like men and talking about relevant things, they'll accuse other content creators, and we have a good idea you have a good idea who I'm talking about. I'm not going to mention names because I don't want to give them any more credence or credibility.
Right. Before you move, before you move on, let me interject something. You bastards know who we're talking about, and you're going to die nameless.
Exactly.
Go on.
Yeah, So, and then they'll talk about, all these guys do is talk about women, or they do this, or they're the quote unquote doll diddlers. And what pisses me off about that is I was just trying to be neutral and do my thing. And that's been well documented. But then for whatever reason, they had to drag me into it, which was a mistake. And then while they're accusing a group of people of doing that, at the same time, they're acting like a bunch of nasty, gossipy, catty women, gossiping about other men, trying to sink them, trying to tarnish their reputation by accusing them of doing certain things. And how's that help? How does that help men who are seeking knowledge and wisdom? How does that help men who are trying to navigate their way through the valley of suicide without a map? I mean, how does that help people? And it's and it's a dual-edged sword too, because on one hand you got these content creators, these spurgs, who all took the little bus, and they made poopies. But on the other hand, you have, outside of this YouTube thing or the social media thing, you have a lot of men that don't call themselves MGTOW. They could plainly see the writing on the wall and they're walking away. So while that's going on, you got these guys, like acting like they're tumbling out of a clown car, and but nobody's laughing.
Well, and I think that it's kind of funny you mentioned this too, because if you look at like the people who, and I don't want to segue on this too much, but hashtag show alert, check out the Dollhouse, my sponsor. But if you look at, for instance, the difference between sex toys between men and women, there are women out there who have sex toys all day long. There are married women with sex toys out there.
Like Jackhammer 9000, right?
They got vibrators and dildos and everything else, and a variety of other sex toys that are out there for women. Then the second that a viable sex toy arrives for men, all of a sudden it's a problem. All of a sudden it's we have to impute these negative connotations and these dishonest associations with it, because we need to shame it. Because I'll tell you what, you're not going to buy the Viagra in my affiliate link in the description of my video if you have a sex doll, and you're not going to get my free ebook on how to pick up chicks if you're banging a sex doll. And more importantly,
but the shame is it's other MGTOW men doing this. It's not like you got it's one thing if a trad cuck or a PUA does it, or some male feminist cuck boy does it, but you're having other MGTOW, and it's like, my attitude is, I'm not particularly into sex dolls, but I support other men's right to have one.
Yeah. It's like, and listen,
I think it's a good
as a Latino. Yeah. And it's like, as a Latino, male, I think it's important that people understand that, I don't support the idea of white nationalism, but I'll tell you what, I'll support your right to talk about it. I'll support your free speech right to talk about it. And I completely support Jared Taylor's lawsuit. I completely support his lawsuit against Twitter for free speech, because you know what? I don't give a shit what he's talking about. He has a right to say it, even if I disagree with the words that are coming out of his mouth. And I think that the same thing should hold true here. And I think that those people who say that, especially the people in the United States who say, oh, well, I believe in free speech and I believe in this and that. Well, then you need to shut the fuck up, and you need to quit shaming people who are trying to exercise their free speech, who are not hurting anyone. And I think that's the piece where most people miss. So, I think that's something that has to be addressed. I know that's kind of a bit of a side rant. But I think that this idea, though, of these communities trying to shame everybody for what they're doing when there's disagreement, we have to learn how to civilly disagree. And I think that this is another issue where we as a society, because of all the social justice bullshit that's been going on, we as a society have forgotten to have how to have relationships. And I'm not even talking about, marriages or families or things. I'm talking about relationships between friends, relationships between coworkers.
It's one thing to have a disagreement on a principle. Right. Like, say you don't agree with certain things, and I'm going to go on a little bit of a segue, take a brief stop at Tangentville. It's okay to disagree on principles in public, right?
Sure.
So, but like when there's a personal disagreement or something, I was always brought up from the military that you praise in public and quote unquote reprimand in private. And if I got a beef with someone on a personal level, and DDJ, I'll take it private with them.
Absolutely.
I won't start like, oh, I disagree on this one thing. And this is the most goddamn unmanly thing, in my opinion, that you could do, is that you have a disagreement with someone, then all of a sudden it's World War III with them. And once where you guys are, they're, your friends, or at least not enemies, it turns into a war over one little thing instead of just taking it private, try to resolve it. If you can't resolve it, agree to disagree and move the hell on. And that just, but just the whole starting a war over it. And I try not to do this because I don't like it. I hate it when I see it. It doesn't have to be that serious. That's not a manly thing to do. That's what women do.
And the sad part about it is that they're not even arguing because they believe in the principles they're standing for. Most of them are just drama marketing so that they can increase their subscriber base.
Well, that's dishonorable.
Yeah.
So,
APOC,
go ahead.
There's a lot of that. Yeah, there's a lot of this crap going on. I don't know if it's I'm sure in some cases it's intentional because they're trying to make money off of the phenomenon. So like the little crew that, there's a couple of crews out there that seem to be trying to exploit the manosphere and the MGTOW for currency and money and so on, as opposed to just making content and climbing the ladder like normal. They're trying to take the balloon and suck air out of it for themselves by pushing other people out of the way and by overinflating their own value and by using bullshit positive thought speak and all the things that we're used to from hard sellers. So yeah, there is quite a bit of that going on. It really does bother me because it's not, as Grizzly was saying earlier, I don't even know how many men I've talked to in private who were going through the valley of suicide and needed a little help. And, when you're in that situation, if you're not at all, if you don't understand that you're literally talking to someone who could, in a day or two might pull the trigger and end their own life. If you don't understand that, take that responsibility on yourself, you're a fucking asshole. That is just, to me, that's reprehensible.
Well, and that's my point, is that, and this kind of ties in, being red pill by itself is not enough. And this whole, alpha beta paradigm with external status, it's not the entire piece of the puzzle either. And men are searching, and they are suffering, and they are being attacked and demonized and harassed. And men who are just waking up, who are brand new to the red pill, their lives are falling apart around them. And you have these people that are so selfish and so self-centered and so narcissistic and so predatory that they are going around and gaslighting other content creators and gaslighting people who are trying to do the work, trying to help men, trying to teach men to get through it. You're destroying the manosphere, and at the same time, they're inadvertently helping feminists continue to discriminate against men at the cost of men's lives. And I think that people don't get that. They don't appreciate it because they are fucking children. And they haven't had good mentorship in their lives either. And I think that if they stopped and thought about it for a minute, they'd be like, oh, shit, I never considered it that way. And I think that that's the piece that's most important, is that, what they don't understand, especially if you look at the MGTOW sphere, is that there's a lot of room. There's the nice thing about YouTube and the nice thing about a modular system like YouTube or even social media in general, is there's a lot of room to grow. There's, you're not fighting for subs because, one person might be subscribed to 50 or 60 people. So what? And you're not competing for eyes on screens. What you're doing is you are focusing on, or should be focusing on, educating men so that those men that are seeking the red pill have a place to go. And you're absolutely correct, APOC. I mean, I've spoken to dozens of men who you can tell that they're in the valley of suicide. They don't really want to talk about it, but they're isolated because testosterone isolates us. And, they are at their wits' end because they are strong, reliant, self-fulfilling men who are always used to solving the problem. But then the second you take them out of the context they're comfortable with, all of a sudden they become the omega. They become the nerd or the outcast or whatever it is that breaks them. And they're lost. And so without good mentorship and without good support, those men will kill themselves and they will kill people around them. And these things are, in my opinion, in many cases, they're avoidable. And so those people who go out and attack others, who spurg, who they're doing a disservice. And because here's the thing, is that they're not just, when somebody kills themselves, they're not just killing themselves. They're hurting everybody else around them. And so, you hear these people all the time, especially with trad cons and with the I'm going to call them, for lack of a better term, the poser MGTOW and some of these other people within the manosphere. You hear these people talking about how they care about men and how they want to support men, yet when it comes to someone they disagree with who supports many of their same values, they go out of their way to attack them. And they go out of their way to silence them, not realizing that they're silencing an ally. They are silencing somebody who cares about many of the same things they care about. And sure, you may have points of disagreement, but it's like what Grizzly said. Be a dignified man. Reach out to those people that you have those disagreements with and have that conversation. Now, you may not be able to have that disagreement, in any kind of meaningful way. It may be at an impasse where you can't have the conversation. But again, if you know how to maintain the relationship with a level of mutual respect, now all of a sudden the relationship becomes stronger than that particular point of disagreement. And I can tell you right now that, like, in my Discord, I have points of disagreement with everybody within the Discord on certain different things. And that's fine. That's acceptable. But the relationships are more important to me than the disagreements themselves. And while I respect those disagreements, they don't control the relationship.
It really irritates me, this era of groupthink. Disagreement is desirable.
Right.
Let's repeat that again. Disagreement is desirable. You want to be disagreeing with people around you all the time because that's how you learn new things. And if you can't treat each other with respect while you're in the middle of a disagreement, you haven't learned how to adult.
Exactly.
Well, also, on top of that, those disagreements lead to solutions sometimes.
Right. Exactly. They always do. They always do. That's the thing. The best solutions. I've been working in tech for a very long time, and the best solutions to large-scale problems that I've ever seen come up with have been as the result of some very heated, very pissed off discussions that eventually ended up with real good solutions.
And I'll tell you what, APOC, what you've just described is the evolution of martial arts.
Yeah.
I mean, that's how martial arts have evolved. They said, oh, that technique works, that technique doesn't. Oh, the circumstances have changed. Now the new techniques are viable and the old techniques aren't. I mean, there's absolutely, you have to have that disagreement. I completely agree with that.
And you always do. There's no resolving. You can resolve a particular disagreement, but having disagreement must always occur. Otherwise, you're not progressing forward, and the people around you are not progressing.
Well, and you're forming an echo chamber, and that's where everybody starts to deteriorate, and that's where the degeneration comes from.
Yeah, and everything goes to shit.
Right. So with that said, we've been going for probably about an hour and 15 minutes. I think it's been a fantastic discussion. But I want to, because of time constraints, I want to get to the Q&A. I'm looking at the dashboard for Streamlabs, and I don't see any Bukkake choke slams redeemed for questions, so I don't know if it's working. So if you're in the chat and obviously you're hearing this, go ahead and let me know if you've tried to ask a question with the Bukkake choke slam and it didn't work, because I want to make sure that works. It was broken for a while, so if it's working again, then let's use it as well. But with that in mind, Rose and Wolf, what do we got for questions?
We've only got a few.
That's fine.
So, Rose, go ahead.
Give me a sec.
All right, your second's up.
Thank you.
Yep, it's over.
Oh, wait. No, that's a comment.
Right. That's fine. Okay, so it looks like the Bukkake choke slams are now working. Yes, WRP beater. Bukkake choke slams are working. And Gojin, yes, they are working. I got your question. So yes, Bukkake choke slams are working. Feel free to redeem them as well. Go for it. Rose?
Sorry, it didn't copy properly. Okay. What are your thoughts about the alpha/beta?
You broke up on the last part. Go ahead again. Hello?
I'm sorry. Hello. What are your thoughts on what are your thoughts on about the alpha/beta
All right, hang on. I'll get this. Words are hard. Words are hard. What are your thoughts on the alpha beta dichotomy translating in other countries?
I think it's a question of external status is more than anything else, and I think it's temporary status. Again, I think if your alpha has that alpha status and somebody beats him down, or a group of people beat him down, he's no longer alpha anymore, and he might be omega, ostracized, or even be killed. I think that when it comes to social animals, I think that the alpha beta paradigm is pretty much the same regardless of culture, because humans are social animals.
Can I make a comment?
Go for it.
I'd like to make one nuanced point on this. Becoming an alpha should be a surprise to you. And what I mean by that is the way it really works is you are who you are and what you are. And because you are, suddenly you're at the top of the pile. You never decided to be at the top of the pile, but you are because of who you are and what you are. It just happens. You look over your shoulder and everyone's behind you. And you're like, oh, I didn't realize. Oh, I guess I'm on top of the pile. It's like a surprise
butt sex chain,
yeah,
like
basically.
A gangbang. Okay,
yeah, no, but it's true. I mean, it's if you want to be this thing, if you want to be better at what you do, to be the best in your field, that's different. But getting there should be a surprise, because you should always be striving to be better.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Yeah, and here's the surprise thing. It's like someone comes up to you. It's like, "Hey, dude, you're the guru now, man." I'm like, "Me the guru?"
Yeah. I'm like,
you just do your job. Your qualities and your abilities rise to the surface.
Yeah.
Without you realizing it. It's part of the warrior's journey.
And there it is. All right. Next question.
All right. By the way, the guy that asked that was the guest from Japan on the TFM show last night. He goes by October 1 Go in here. Welcome.
Okay. Yeah, welcome, man.
All right. So the next question is from Artemis the Kitten to all of us. M. Crafts recently did a video that MGTOW will fall into egotistical dick measuring and catering to dominance instead of self-actualization because it's easier. In the end, MGTOW is only for a small number of men who can actually self-actualize. What are your thoughts on that?
I disagree with it, and let me explain why. I can understand where somebody, and I don't know who this person is. I don't know if they're in the MGTOW community or not. I've never heard of them before. But I will say this. The MGTOW that will fall into that trap are not the guys who are adhering to the MGTOW philosophy. Those are going to be the guys who, they're failed former PUAs. They're in the MGTOW community. And those are the ones who are currently having the dick measuring contest. And they've been having the dick measuring contest now for, in my view, since December of last year. When it comes to those guys, yeah, that's what it is. But you see the difference, and I think that the piece that most people miss when they discuss the MGTOW community is the difference between the stated MGTOW community and the unstated MGTOW community that Grizzly touched on earlier in the stream. There are men out there who know what MGTOW is, or they don't know what MGTOW is, and they don't identify as MGTOW, but they are still living a MGTOW lifestyle. And in its most base level, being MGTOW just means avoiding marriage. Now, most guys who avoid marriage, who understand marriage laws, are also trying to avoid living with a woman, specifically because living with a woman can confer in many areas common law marriage. And even more importantly, the reason they're avoiding marriage is to avoid being divorce raped. So some of these men are even avoiding relationships with women, short and long term. And again, every man decides for himself. But the reason that they're doing that is because they don't want to be falsely accused of a sex crime. They don't want to be falsely accused of domestic violence. They don't want to have a civil domestic violence order placed against them that they can't defend against in a discriminatory family court. So when it comes to those types of men that's there, that's the baseline for MGTOW. Anything else that MGTOW content creators discuss outside of that very small box is not MGTOW philosophy. You know, when TFM talks about taking women's rights away, that's not a MGTOW philosophy. That's his philosophy. And people, they conflate the two. When you hear about other MGTOW content creators that say MGTOW is war, that is their philosophy. That's not MGTOW philosophy. And I've always said this, is that much of the MGTOW content has already been created. So you can't really recreate the wheel per se. But the reality is that when it comes to MGTOW, many of us try to be individuals in a community of individuals rather than a community of collectivists. I think some community is important and good, but when it comes to this idea of having this dick measuring contest and things like that, I think that a lot of, especially if you talk to a lot of the more mature MGTOW, they're more willing to work collaboratively rather than having this like dominance hierarchy thing that a lot of people are talking about.
Can I make a fast comment about that?
Yeah, go for it.
The thing about it is that every single competition also is cooperation. We have to, if you have to have a good engagement, you have to agree on the rules. You have to agree on conduct. You have to agree. Basically, there's a lot of agreement that has to happen before you actually have a competition and before you actually start competing. And what these guys are doing is they're throwing all that out the window. And that's what's creating that's one of the things I think is creating a toxic environment in this manosphere.
And here's the other thing too. These people will yell and scream very loudly and they'll have their dick measuring contest. And then everybody's going to go, oh, it's them. And they're going to move on to the other thing.
Right, exactly.
And you could see this because, they might have 50,000 subscribers, for example, but, their videos are only getting 500 views or 1,000 views or something like that. It's just, they're not getting the views based on subscribers. So even though these subscribers exist, nobody gives a shit. And you see this all the time.
Jump in on that.
Go ahead.
About this whole thing. Starting out with MGTOW, you got your basic tenets. Don't get married. Don't cohabitate. Don't get women pregnant, blah, blah, blah. But then as you go down the rabbit hole, and the more and more you go down the rabbit hole, MGTOW starts becoming a very personal thing. And these fake alphas, these guys, and we all know who we're talking about. They want to have a pissing contest and they want to see which one could piss the farthest. And, it's not so much at that point, they become, I don't know the proper word, but I'm going to say less MGTOW and more jock slob than MGTOW. And that's not MGTOW. MGTOW, as it ends up becoming a very individual thing, and it doesn't become a thing where you're beating your chest trying to see who's the best and baddest ass MGTOW out there. As your personal, as you go on the road to self-actualization, which I believe is part of MGTOW as you go along, because you can only talk about don't get married, don't have kids, don't cohabitate, blah blah blah, for only so long. But then you could get stuck in that thing, or you could move on to other stuff and go deeper down.
Right.
Because it's called men going their own way. It's not men going Spurg number 625's way or so-called MGTOW Authority 1001's way. It's going your own way.
Well,
that kind of always surprised me. I mean, it's in the name, guys.
Yeah. Well, and that's the other thing too, is it's what Paul Proteus said. And again, for those who haven't seen Paul Proteus's content, you need to watch his content. He is fantastic, but he says the same thing. He says, it's not what you're going away from, it's what you're going to. So, men, we can have positive lives free from a lot of the drama once you get the drama out of your life. Getting the drama out of your life is just the starting point. That is the red pill. That is the painful piece. The drama is gone. You have to learn how to live a new way, have a new paradigm. Now you do this, you go to the gym, or you work out at home, or you find some place to exercise. You feed your mind with books and intelligent content. And of course, you try to be successful in your own life to improve yourself, so that, if you need extra money on a rainy day, or you need something else on a rainy day, you have that ability to go do it. But this idea that there's going to be a dick measuring contest, sure, there's going to be dick measuring contests anywhere, but I don't think that the guys that are working to become self-actualized, they don't give a shit. And here's a spoiler alert. The cervix is 4 inches in. An average man with an average penis can hit the cervix on every thrust. Unless A, he's fat, or B, she's fat, or C, they're all fat. So with that in mind, it's not an issue for those people that are still with women. So just, a thing, a little pro tip there. Next question.
All right, let me weigh in as well real
Go for
quick. I also disagree with this guy. I think he vastly underestimates men as a whole. I mean, I don't really consider myself MGTOW, but I am red pill. I mean, I'm just a dude disguised as another dude who thinks he's a wolf. But I have a very strong dominance instinct.
So what you're saying is you're a furry?
No. No, because that's just creepy. But that's just creepy. But I have a very strong dominance instinct, and most people wouldn't even know that,
right? Because
I keep it in check. So I think this guy is way off base with that. Okay, next question. Can you expect? This is for DDJ, by the way. Can you expect integrity in a professional business relationship?
No, but you can demand it. People will
trust but verify.
Trust but verify. But you have to understand that, listen, people, humans in human nature, they will try to do whatever they can get away with. And it is important for you to understand what the four corners of your acceptable decisions or acceptable behavior is. And then when people step outside of those four corners, then, they experience the natural consequences. And I don't mean, you grab them and you bring them in the back room and beat them with a lead pipe. That's not what I'm talking about. But what I'm saying is, like, say, for instance, you're in a business relationship with somebody and they lie to you, or they steal money from you, or they embezzle, or they share trade secrets. Well, you don't associate with those people anymore. And, I always say that if you can't appreciate my presence, maybe you'll appreciate my absence. And everybody has something to offer, and they have things that they bring to the table. And so when it comes to this idea of, these interpersonal relationships, whether they be personal or professional, there are natural consequences for that conduct, and you can't allow people to walk all over you. Now, that doesn't mean that, you should always run around and have a chip on your shoulder, or that, you have to be a certain way all the time, because obviously all relationships require some level of compromise. And the analogy that comes to mind is the old Dave Chappelle skit about when keeping it real goes wrong. And it is absolutely fucking hilarious. If you guys haven't seen it, it's on YouTube, but it's called When Keeping It Real Goes Wrong, and it's Dave Chappelle. But that's, so you could be too rigid, like the character that Dave Chappelle plays in the skit, or you could be too passive where everybody walks over you. You have to strike a balance based on the nature of your relationships, on the context of the relationships, on the environment that you're in. And you have to do a cost benefit analysis to say, well, do I let this thing go so I can get this other benefit down the road? Or do I just, cut it off here? In any interaction where there could be some opportunity for somebody to take advantage of somebody else, there has to be a cost benefit analysis, or else you're setting yourself up for failure and abuse.
As the ancient sage Bruce Lee once said, be like water, my friend.
That's it. And piss all over everybody.
Kinky.
There it is. All right. Next question.
Do you believe Islam can be the way? This person seems to think that it'll fix the fertility rate.
Do I think what can be the way?
Islam.
Islam is patriarchal. So, I mean, it would fix the fertility rate, but I'll tell you what, you wouldn't have my white babies. You wouldn't have your white nationalism. And I think that anybody who, doesn't want to follow the Islamic scriptures, well, guess what? You're going to get a rooftop tour. I think that it's going to be a way for some people, but I think at the same token, it's going to kill a lot of people in the process. What people don't understand is that, there's a lot of conflict between the lifestyle of a Sharia compliant Muslim than there is in a theological or a theocracy, like a Muslim theocracy, than there is in Western culture. So, I mean, I don't want to dig into that too much, because again, I know that there have been other Twitch content creators who have had their streams taken down for being Islamophobic. But I will say that there's a lot of disagreement there. And I think that before it becomes, quote unquote, the way, there's going to be a lot of strife to get there. And I'm not sure that that strife would be worth it.
Let me just say one thing about Arabian Islam as opposed to Indonesian Islam. Arabian Islam is actually extremely gynocentric as practiced in reality. They make a show of being, a certain way, and formally that's how they practice. And in degenerate, lawless areas, it goes hardcore. But broadly speaking, across civilized Arabic, Saudi Arabia, Yemen, Oman, and so on, it actually is quite gynocentric as practiced in reality.
Good to know. All right, next question.
Oh, all right. Let's get some questions, guys. There are no more questions. All
right. Well, that's okay because we're at 90 minutes, so we can end the stream here. So let me end it on a couple shill alerts, and also before I do, I just wanted to thank Grizzly, Wolf, and APOC for sitting around and having this roundtable here today. I also wanted to thank Rose. I appreciate you helping out with the questions and doing the Q&A stuff. I think that, obviously it helps me because then I don't have to worry about thinking about it. Guys, if you're watching or you see the stream later and you are interested in being on the stream and you have something that's, worth talking about for 45 minutes to an hour, feel free to reach out to me at misandry.happens@gmail.com. And, we'll kind of go from there. Now, as far as the rest of everything is concerned, again, you can follow me on minds.com. You can follow me on Bitchute, which I would appreciate it if you subscribe to me there, because the advantage of having me on Bitchute is that you will automatically be notified if I put out new content, whereas YouTube has changed the way that they do their algorithm. So even if you subscribe and even if you hit the bell, you may not always be notified when I put out new content. So this will allow you to kind of keep track of my content when I put it out. You can also reach out to me via misandrytoday.com, which is my website, and you can follow me on gab.ai. And as well as there is a fan Twitter. On Twitter, it's DDJ's Mind Palace, I believe is what it's called. And you can follow me on Twitter as well. And I try to have I communicate with the person who runs that, and they try to update that as much as possible. But, there's only 24 hours in a day, so you do what you can. But the other places are really good to get a hold of me and to be able to follow my content there as well. And then again, for those people who subscribed with Twitch Prime, I appreciate it. If you're have a Twitch Prime membership and you subscribe to me, it's free for you, and I get a little bit of a benefit out of it. So feel free to do that as well. And then we will go from there. So thank you, everybody, for tuning in today. Thank you for the questions and for, patronizing the stream. I hope everybody has a great afternoon. But before we go, does anybody have any final thoughts on the roundtable here? Do you guys have any final thoughts of anything that you want to touch on before we go?
Yeah, sure. I think that you guys kind of covered it, but I'll put it in a different way. Being a Spurg, and being a red pill Spurg, or supposedly a red pill Spurg, doesn't help anybody. It pushes people who might be interested in, red pill praxeology away. And it also makes you low-hanging fruit for feminists and all those types. So don't do it. Stop shadow boxing. Stop.
Fair enough. Anybody else?
I think, just personally, I think we should have these roundtables more often, maybe as a regular thing, as a kind of to break things up just a little bit. Yeah. These roundtables. I don't know what the cycle would be, but doing them
once every month, once every 2 months, that'd be great.
Yeah. I like these roundtables. It's good to have a conversation where there isn't shouting or dick measuring or anything like that, where we could talk like adult masculine men as opposed to children or act like neurotic bitchy women.
Yeah. I think it's important that men have conversations with one another where they're not constantly dropping F-bombs or interrupting each other. I think that, people need to see what civil dialogue looks like because we don't have enough of it. APOC, did you have anything you wanted to close on?
I always have too much to say, so I'll just I'll just say thanks a lot for hosting this, DDJ. It's very enjoyable, and I really enjoy talking with you and the other guys here. It's always a privilege.
Great. All right, guys, I thank you again for tuning in. Thank you for the questions, and thank you for the support. I'm going to go ahead and shoot down to stream shortly. I will be doing post-production, and I'll try to upload it either later today or early tomorrow. You guys enjoy the rest of your day. Take care.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for having us.
Later.
Mm-hmm.